everyone. This is Dave Warner, and welcome to Small Town Life. And it seems to be I'm on a roll these days with authors, and I've got another author with me, Vincent Palmieri. He's originally from Frankfort and now living in Whitesboro. Vincent, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for having me.
Well, I usually want to know who people are, right? So we go through a little bit of, growing up and who you are and kind of your life path. So give me kind of it doesn't have to be the big book version, but
the small book version.
Cliff Notes works, right?
Well, as you said, I was born in Frankfort. I was born in 1955. I lived in Frankfort till I was 34 years old. Then I got married and I moved to Whitesboro, and I've been in Whitesboro since then. I'm a 1973 graduate of Frankfort High School, a 1977 graduate of Oswego State University, and I'm a 1989 graduate of the College of St. Rose. I've lived in this area my whole life. Now that I've been retired for many years, over a decade now, I do a lot more traveling and going wherever I want to go. But I always kind of did that anyway, even when I had a family and even when I was single. I just schlepped my wife and kids along with me, sometimes under duress, but nevertheless, they went with me. So
you were the traveler and they weren't, right?
Oh, and my daughter's like me, and my son is like my wife. Isn't that funny? The way my son was just as happy staying home. My daughter's like me. She wants to run all over the place and go here and go there. So it happens. You know what I mean, Dave?
Oh, yeah, I know. So career-wise, what did you do?
I was a special ed teacher, a middle school special ed teacher for 34 years. I started teaching in the Frankfort school. I started teaching elementary school, actually. I used to teach in what was West Frankfort School, Reese Road School, and Frankfort High School. And then there was some redistricting taking place. So myself and another girl had the least amount of seniority, so our jobs got cut. And then a guy who was the head of a director of special ed, a guy by the name of Joe Zizzi, said to me, special education is the way to go. And it still is. If you want to teach school, that's where the jobs are. So he said, what I would do if I were you, start working on a master's degree in special ed. So I did. And in 1989, I got a master's degree in special ed. And I taught school for 34 years, about my first 4 or 5 years in Frankfort. And then after that in the Utica City Schools at Kennedy Middle School. I was a middle school resource teacher. So a lot of years went by in a very diverse school district. And I look back at it now and I often say to myself, how did I do that?
Yeah.
But it doesn't make any difference anymore.
Yeah, because you're retired, you did it. You've got the diploma, right?
I did it. I worked soon after I retired. I continued to work for the Utica schools a little bit. And I worked for Utica College for, probably 25 years. I was an adjunct instructor. And I worked for the Comets when I first retired. I worked for the Comets for, 3 years or so.
Oh, really? You're going to take me on a path now. Remember, I said, there's no telling where I'm going to go. What'd you do for the Comets?
I just did the ticket sales and seating and all that stuff. And the shows, that was the best part of that job. Comets every night or whenever they played, not every night necessarily, but the monster trucks and the bands and that was the best part of the job. Right there.
Yeah.
So I did that for a few years, and then times changed, things changed. So that was about 7 or 8 years ago when I stopped doing all of those things. And I guess I became a professional retiree, if there is such a thing.
There isn't. That's what I am too.
I tell you, I find myself very busy, to be honest with you. Sometimes I wonder how.
Yeah. The reason I ask about the Comets is we have another podcast that we do called CNY Hockey Report. Mm-hmm. In fact, we're doing another episode this afternoon. And so when I tell Scott Kinville that, you were working for the Comets, he'll be interested because he's got me into hockey.
Yeah. 3 years, I think. I worked with, Rob. Yeah. And my wife knew Rob's mother for years.
Oh, wow.
Mike Pacheba, Matty Pacheba, Jeff Lloyd. A lot of those people still work there. It was fun. Comets were fun.
Yeah. I want to go back to your growing up in Frankfort, because I think that forms kind of a basis for a lot of what you're doing now. One of the things I've noticed, not being from Little Falls, being in here, but hearing the stories about growing up. And, I had a gentleman on yesterday, Ray Lenarsic, and he
I
was
was just
talking
gonna say,
about,
you got to hear from RJ about those stories.
yeah.
I was
So
gonna
you
say
know
that.
him?
Oh God, I've known him for years.
Oh my God. See,
Oh yeah,
it's such a small world.
it
He
is.
was talking about the Furnace Street Gang and growing
Oh yeah,
up and of course he was into his Graham Lorraine and all of the other things that he's
yes,
doing, programs he's doing now.
I still belong to Frankfort Qantas. I've belonged since
Wow.
1985. Matter of fact, I'm the president again, if you could believe that.
Oh, good Lord.
40 years later, I'm president again. RJ belonged at one point, and he got us, when it first started out, he got us involved with the Graham Lorraine Project.
Yeah.
And we continue to, but you know what's funny, Dave? We're a victim of our own success. When that thing first started out in the Frankfurt schools, let's say they had 20 kids, well, we would end up with like 16 or 17 of them because other groups would pick up the three. Well, now we don't even get any anymore
Oh, wow.
because all the other groups, Teachers Association, whatever, have picked them up. So now we moved into a thing. I don't know if RJ would even know about that. Was we get 8, 10 families and we supply them with food for the
Oh,
Christmas season, turkey, that kind of thing, because we can't get any more kids for Graham Lorraine. We got in a situation last year where we did get a couple because these kids needed like big sizes, like 3X,
right.
and that
Right.
kind. And typical stores don't have that. So we had to go to like LL Bean and that kind of thing. So a woman named Lucille Hand, who has coordinated in Frankfurt for years with the Frankfurt schools.
He mentioned Lucille yesterday, I
Yeah,
believe. Yep.
Lucille. And she said, would you guys do it? We said, sure. I just talked to her last week. I said, you just tell us what you want us to do and we'll do it. So we've become a victim of our own success. We don't
You
have
know
any
that
kids anymore.
that's the only way to go. But the food is valuable too. The food
Oh, of
pantries,
course.
there's a huge need there. So can't believe we moved off of writing into Graham Lorraine and
Into
food
the Graham
pantries.
Lorraine
That's
thing. How quick
yeah,
that happened.
how quickly that happened. The
Yeah.
fact that you know him, but that was the thing up here talking about growing up and hearing him talk about growing up and all the other people here. They just talk about the times when they were growing up, and I have a sense that when you decided to become a writer, that your experiences growing up in Frankfurt were what drove you, right?
Both books, really. I mean, Ruthie's book is on Orchard Street. Ruthie moved in across the street from me, but my grandmother. Matter of fact, I just had breakfast with the guy who bought my grandmother's house, where I live too. And fortunately, it burned down, many years ago. But how I came in contact with Ruth was she moved across the street from my grandmother's house. And my mom and dad, she was illiterate. She was 24 years old. She'd been in a foster care system literally since the day she was born. And she couldn't read and write. And my mother and my dad took a liking to her. So it was a lot of things like my mother would, she didn't have time to clean our apartment because my grandmother lived downstairs and we lived upstairs. And so she'd say, go call Ruth, and she'll come over and Ruth would vacuum and all that. And my mother would pay her because she didn't have any money. So that story, a lot of it takes place at the Syracuse State School in Geddes, but that started on Orchard Street. And then the King of Orchard Street is on Orchard Street. People will ask me, Dave, how people read my book, even Ruthie Deeply, and they'll say, how big is this Orchard Street? And I say, it's 5 blocks. I don't think it's a half a mile from end to end. My goodness, it sounds like it's something in Atlanta or something. I said, no, it's this little 5 streets. But it was it really, I was at the Herkimer County Historical Society last night. I had a very well attended Meet the Author thing. And it was its own little section there. It was its own little business district. It was like the place where you wanted to be. And there were stores, grocery stores, and jobs, and there was, old hotels from the Erie Canal. I said last night, the only time you left is when you walked to church. And that was only 4 or 5 blocks away anyway. So it was its own little self-contained business district, residential district, whatever
Right.
the case may
And
be.
you had everything there. You could just walk
Right
to it,
there,
right? Right there.
right there. Your grandparents. I mean, my one of my great aunts actually lived on the corner. I lived at my grandmother's house. We had other relatives on the other end of the street, Tamburros. I mean, it was really a little self-contained kind of thing. You didn't have to go anywhere.
Wow. And so all of those stories growing up, what got you into the writing part of it, to write those stories down, especially
Well,
since Ruthie Deeply was your first book?
well, Ruthie, how that came about with Ruthie Davis, I've known this woman my whole life, literally. And when I lived in Frankfurt before I was married, I would see her. I mean, Frankfurt's not real big. It's kind of hard to get lost in Frankfurt. And so you see her in the post office, and I'd see her wherever. And I always, Ruthie, how are you? And that. And then I lost track of her for about 25 years.
Wow.
And when my son graduated from high school in 2014, I believe it was, I picked up the newspaper like the week before he graduated. And there she was, 80 something years old, on the cover of the newspaper for winning a Volunteer of the Year award for, I don't know, community action or whatever it might have been. So I called her and I said, Ruth, I haven't seen you in 25 years. I remembered her phone number. I mean, that's the kind of
Wow.
contact I used to have with this woman.
Yeah.
And I said, my son's going to be graduating this weekend. Why don't you come to the graduation party? It was over here at the Whitestown Vets Club. I said, why don't you come to the graduation party? My mom and dad were still alive. We can reminisce. We can have some food. And, so she did. I told her where it was and she found the place. And she came in. She said, I got to show you something. And I said, what's that? And she said, well, not right now. She said, I'll come over your house. Let's have the party here. She said, I'll come over your house next week. And so she did. And she came in and she handed me this folder. You would remember, Dave, in her office with the string that you
Yeah.
wrap the red string around.
Oh yeah.
And I looked at the thing, and it looked like it'd been around the world in a UPS truck a couple times.
Right.
And I said to her, I said, Ruth, what is this? She said, open it up. Well, I opened this thing, and if you look at the cover, that background it was her intake. It was all of her information from the day she was intaken. It was about that thick of her history in the New York State School.
Wow.
And I'm looking at this, and after being a special ed teacher, I was kind of used to all those years to read. And this was soon after I retired, to reading those kind of things. And I'm looking through this, and I'm thinking, what in God's green earth is this? So I said to her, Ruthie, what is this? And she said to me, it's my records from the Syracuse State School. Oh, I said, now I got it. Very sketchy, especially in the beginning. Um, I said, Ruth, this you got a good story here. We should put this in writing. And she said, you think so? I said, well, let's try it. I had never written, although I had started a book when I went to college, and I graduated from college a long time ago. I said, well, let's see what happens. And sure enough, we started working on it. And after a couple of years or so, it started to kind of gel. And I thought, well, we better finish this thing. So we did. It's been on the market for, oh goodness, about 7 years now, I would say, something like that. It's a good, solid story. I tell people with the King of Orchard Street at this book signing last night, because a couple of people were interested in Ruthie Deep. I said, you got to understand something, though. Ruthie's story is a completely different story, type of story from the King of Orchard Street. Some bad stuff happened to Ruth. And I can remember my mom always saying Ruth had a bad childhood. Ruth
Right.
had a bad childhood. A lot of abandonment, a lot of just shuffling around, places. I said to her, Ruth, here, this is like a 4-month gap here. Where were you? I don't know. I was a child. I was 5, 6, 7 years old. I have no, I said, were you homeless? Could be. Were you living with, could be. She says, I have no idea really where this came from.
Wow.
But in the end, I tell people it's kind of a slog to read it because it's a tough story. But in the end, it plays out for her. That's the bottom line. As far as I know, I haven't had any contact with her in a while. She lives 91 years old, 90. She lives in Ilion. She's happy. She's healthy. She's somewhat restricted by her age and the weather and that kind of thing, which everybody is.
Right.
But it played out for her. She taught herself to read and write. She taught herself to grocery shop. She had a family. She had 3 kids. She still lives in her same house. So it's really a victory. She's a victory. No matter how hard the state school, New York State foster care, tried to dismantle this woman, and I think to some degree, some people consciously did, it didn't work. It
Right.
did not work. She's fine. She's
Wow.
good. She's healthy. She lives in her house, and she does what she wants to do every day. And that's a good thing at 90 years old.
Oh, absolutely. Especially the fact that she's still in her own home.
Yep.
I mean, that's key these days.
She
Staying
does
in your
very
own
well.
home. Yeah. So did that success of that first book drive you to write another one?
Well, I always had the King of Orchard Street again in the back of my head here, but I wasn't sure where I was going with it. So probably about 4 years ago, I was in Maine with a relative of mine and his son and his children and my wife. I don't think my kids were with me. They were going to college and that kind of stuff at the time. And this cousin of mine's son, his name is Rob Marchone. He's an MD in Boston. And Rob was there, Colgate University graduate, valedictorian. This guy's intelligent. He's very intelligent. So he said to me, "You finish your book?" And I said, "Almost, Rob. I'm not quite done with it, but almost couple, maybe 3 months or so." So what are you going to do next? I said, "Well, I don't know, but I got this idea." "Well, what is it?" So King of Orchard Street, so on and so on. He said to me, "I got an idea." And I said, "Go ahead. Get the people that are in your book, tell their story. They tell their story to you. You write it. And then the reader decides who's the King of Orchard Street."
I was just about to ask you because you're
Yeah,
one of those 6 people, and I was like,
I'm
"All
one of
right,
the six. Yep.
you
And I
crowning
said,
yourself king there.
"Yeah, I could be. I got some votes."
You got some
So
votes."
I said to him, "Rob, that's a good idea. Kind of an interactive thing, at
Right.
least in a whimsical sense, on a whimsical level, on a fun level. Who's the King of Orchard Street?" So that's basically what I did. And I tell people, you decide who's the King of Orchard Street. Now, people have asked me, "Oh, how am I going to do this?" And if you look at some of my vids on Facebook and that kind of thing, how am I going to? I said, "Well, here's my criteria. And you can use mine or you can develop your own. Of the six people, who's the biggest rascal? Who who creates the most intrigue? Who is the most mischievous? Not in a negative, not to hurt anybody
Right,
or
right.
make any laws or in other words, who's the biggest rascal? That person would be the King of Orchard Street to me.
That's your definition, right?
It might be me. One of my friends told me, "I read your part. I don't have to read anymore. I'm voting for you."
Oh, geez.
I'm not going. My brother-in-law said to me, "Did you ever behave on for 1 second on that street?" I said, "Nobody did. Don't let them fool you. Read
Yeah,
the whole thing. Nobody's innocent here. Believe me when I tell you. Everybody." But again, not in a negative way or a hateful way or
yeah,
break laws. Sometime got a little iffy, got a little close,
yeah.
but it really, and that's the second level of the King of Orchard Street. That's the second story. It's kind of a story in a story. Like you have a movie in a movie. That's the second level. It's a portrayal of a lifestyle. It's a portrayal of a lifestyle of kindness, acceptance. It's a portrayal of a lifestyle where whether you were born and raised there like I was, or you came from Texas, perhaps like you did. Once you were there, you were on the team.
Mm,
You were accepted. Uh, Everybody's door was open. Of course, there were people that kind of came in and out that didn't quite fit the lifestyle. I mean, things happen,
yeah.
but they soon came to that realization themselves and of their own volition. They went where they went, but that was minimal. That was few and far between. Once you got there, as I say, you were on the team, and we all cooperated with each other, and we all helped each other, and it was always a let's all try to do better.
Yeah.
And when one person did better, whether consciously or unconsciously, they brought the other people with them. They
Okay.
helped the other people.
I want a couple of rascal stories from you. I want one from
Oh,
you,
hell out
and
of
I want one. Choose one from one of the other five characters in the books. In the book,
Here's my
because
favorite
I want a
rascal.
rascal story.
I got a lot of them, believe me.
I know
My
you do.
favorite rascal story is this. And people at the end of, if you've ever been on Frankfort Street, is Brown's Feed Mill,
Yeah,
Brown's Feed Company.
yeah.
Used to be Corrado's Feed Company. Well, when I was growing up there, it was a pretty big business. It still is a pretty big business. And they had piles of sand and crushed stone and that kind of stuff that they would sell to the farmers or whoever, you know. So that was like a playground for all of us. I would go down all throughout the course of the day, and I loved these big sand piles. Climb up them, sand come down, climb back up.
Right.
And the summer get a little sweaty, and that sand would stick. So I'd come home back to my mom's apartment after about the third trip, and I'd be covered with sand from head to toe. I'd have it in my ears. I'd have it in my hair. I
Yeah.
had sand everywhere. So my mother would say to me, get in that bathtub. And 5, 6 years old, oh, I don't need to take a bath. I don't take
Yeah.
a bath. So one day she said to me, if you don't get in that bathtub, you're going to get leprosy. I said,
Oh, jeez.
leprosy? What's leprosy? She said, it's a disease. I said, a disease? She says, yeah. You get it from your clothes aren't clean and you don't take a bath. And oh, mom, you better get in that bathtub. You're going to get leprosy. Okay. Reluctantly, I get in the bathtub. A couple of days goes by. And again, I come back covered with the sand. And she said, get in that bathtub. I said, Mom, I don't want to take a bath. You're going to get leprosy. I said, what is leprosy? She went to an encyclopedia and she got a picture of some poor victim with leprosy and said, this is leprosy.
Oh,
I said,
jeez.
get the bath running. Keep the water nice and hot. She used to put a little cap full. Years later, I'd see her used to put a little cap full of Clorox in the bathtub. Really.
Oh, really?
And I said to her, what are you putting Clorox? Gets you nice and white, she said.
Oh,
It bleaches your lip. I said, it'll keep me away from that leprosy, right? She goes, get in the bathtub.
Yeah.
Well, now I got in there fast.
Oh, geez. That's funny.
That's a good one with
Yeah.
the leprosy. I love to tell people that one. And then there was just so many others. At one point, the railroad tracks were not 30 or 40 feet away from my grandmother's house, right? Everybody's backyard there. And, it was like, don't you go near those railroad tracks. Don't you go near those railroad. No, I promise. Well, as soon as my mom went in the house, you know what kids do.
You're on the railroad tracks.
The Mohawk River's down there, it's not a good. So at one point, I was trying to get back before my mom saw me, and I slipped and I hit my head on the track.
Oh, geez.
Pretty hard. So I went in the house and I'm in tears. I said, oh, my head. And it wasn't bleeding or anything, but let me see it. So she put some ice on there and she got a towel or whatever and she wrapped it around my head and she put the ice on there. Well, I'll tell you, Dave, I thought I was the baddest hombre on Orchard Street with that thing on my head. I was so tough and nobody was going to mess with me. Then my father came home and he said, what did you do? And he said, let me look at it. So he looks and keep the ice on there and that. And he got a feather from some kind of toy or something and he stuck it in the back. Like I was an Indian. I was even tougher now. Yeah. And nobody was going to mess with me. Nobody was going to mess with me. And there are hundreds of stories like that in the King of Orchard Street.
What about one of the other ones from your friends?
Pick
a good one.
I got a 2-for-1 with you there.
2-for-1. All right.
2-for-1. Two of the guys. One's name is Johnny Kipper. He lives over in Sequoia. We were at the book signing last night. And the other one's name is Donnie. He lives in Rochester. The same kind of thing, always running around. So right. Donnie and Johnny, same thing at Corrado's feed mill. Same thing with the feed bags, climbing on them. So at some point, Donnie realizes he's got a jackknife in his pocket. So he takes and he slits open one of the bags. So Johnny sees him do it. It's, Donnie, give me that knife. And Johnny slits open another one. Well, not naturally, all the grain pours out of there. So they get scared and they run. They go home, separate directions. They go home. So now they're both in their houses about 10 minutes. They figure, oh, we got away with this. We're not going to get any trouble. Well, sure enough, knock on the door.
Jeez, here they come.
Somebody saw him do it and told the manager of the grain mill that Donnie and Johnny are the ones that did it. So the grain guy goes over to Donnie's house. He's telling his father and Donnie, so I'm in the other room listening. I'm thinking, oh, no, I'm in trouble with this. And he's listening. He's saying, well, you guys got to make it right. We lost money here. That grain we sell that and so on. Yep. So, okay, we'll figure something out. So Donnie's dad takes and calls Johnny's dad and tells him what they did. Well, Fred, what are we going to do? Gee, Frank, I don't know. The two guys, Donnie said, I felt so bad for my father. Looking back at it now, it's funny, but it wasn't fun. The two guys go down there, their fathers, with the shovels, and they're shoveling the grain back in the bags, and they got a needle and thread, and they're sewing the bags back up. You can't make this stuff up.
Oh.
You can't. So Donnie said, I felt so bad for my father. I said, now looking back at it, it's funny. He said, but it wasn't then.
Well, they probably didn't have the money just to
in
purchase
those
the
days.
grain in those days, and they were probably large bags, not
Big,
cheap.
probably 150, 100-pound bags.
Yeah, yeah,
As soon as you cut them, that stuff comes out.
comes piling out. Yeah,
And then, so Donnie tells me the story, and now I go do Johnny's story, 3 months later, 6 months later, and Johnny brings the same. I said, Donnie told me, he goes, that's true. He said, you had to see it, my father. He said, now, from Johnny's house, he could see Corrado's mill, but Donnie couldn't. And Johnny said, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, my poor father, I get my father into this. And here's the two guys shoveling the grain back in, sewing up the bags to try to make it good for the company without having to take the money out of their pockets.
right.
And the manager of the feed mill went for it. He said, okay, we'll just leave it like that. But there are so many stories. I'll give you another quick one, then we can move on. Another guy, Johnny Tabia is his name. His grandfather liked to eat snails, escargot.
Yes.
In Italian, they call it babalouche, but the same thing. So Johnny's grandmother is going to cook the snails for his grandfather. So they're live, like a lobster. You throw them. So the lady was trying to be a little good with the snails. So she would turn the water up a little bit and leave it, and then turn it up, and it would slowly kill the poor things. But anyway, at one point she got the water. The water was getting up there pretty good, and she left the room. She didn't put the top on.
Oh.
So, on the pot. So she goes out in her living room, whatever, and doing what she's doing. And she comes back a few minutes later. Well, now the water's getting up there, and the snails want out naturally. So they're climbing out of there. They're climbing up the walls. They're on the floor. They're all over the place. They want out of there. So here's his grandmother picking up the snails and throwing them back in, cursing at him in Italian. Get in there. She's filling the pot back up. Johnny walks in, and it's like his grandfather says, what are you doing? He said, the snails got out of the thing here. I'm trying to. They were all over the place. They were all
good Lord.
But there are so many stories like that, and they intersect in a lot of ways, and they're cute as could be. Was there things that went wrong? Of course there were.
Yeah.
Things always go wrong. People get hurt. People get in accidents. But generally speaking, the lifestyle was consuming. It was consuming. You were there. Everybody did what they were doing. Everybody helped each other. Everybody accepted each other. Everybody was content. There was no fights. There was no arguments. There was no crime. And it was their own little self-contained area that went five blocks. The whole thing doesn't even go a half mile, I wouldn't think. But that's the second part of the King of Orchard Street. The first is who's the king, and the second is the lifestyle, the portrait that I don't know if you watch movies, but the classic Vertigo. It's a love letter to San Francisco. It's shot on Nob Hill. I don't know if you've ever been to San Francisco.
I have been. Yep.
From the top of the hills, and those are some hills.
Those are some hills.
Those are some hills.
We complain in Little Falls, but those are some hills.
It's only 2 blocks away. That's not far. Yeah. 2 blocks like this.
Up.
And the King of Orchard Street is the same kind of thing. This is a love letter, like Vertigo. That's a love letter to San Francisco, down by the Embarcadero now, but the waterfront. This is the same thing. It's a love letter to the people that lived on Orchard Street in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s. It's meant to paint a portrait of a very positive, very strong, very accepting lifestyle. And the world needs that, because this is a very divisive place now.
Right.
And if you are accepting of people and places and things, that's great. Do it more. If you're not, here's the portrait of how you go. Here's the template of how you go about doing it.
How has the response been to the book? I mean, for
good,
people who have bought it and read it.
Yep. Good. I am hearing on a regular basis, literally, from people all over the United States. I have people that live in Las Vegas, Texas, California, Ohio, that really appreciate it. I hear from people that still live in Frankfort that really appreciate this. I had one girl contact me, I've known my whole life. She said, I'm so happy that her father was a police officer. She said, I'm so happy that my father name came up in this book. She said to me, my dad was a police officer for 30 years. I don't think he ever arrested anybody in his life.
Wow.
Just kind of made it work. You
Yeah.
know, you got to stop because this is going to cause a problem. And that's part of it. I heard from a girl who was my neighbor. After I moved on off of Orchard Street, I moved to Fourth Ave. My dad bought his own house, and a girl who was my neighbor forever. She contacted my mother was an Akavazi Funeral Homes. She contacted Vinny, who called me last night. He said, Marguerite contacted me. She wants to get one of your books. I said, well, just Google it and you get all the information. And I said, wait a minute. I'll bring it over to her. Her mother wanted to read it too. I said, I'll bring it over to her mother's house. I'll put it in her mailbox. She was my next door neighbor. Mary's got to be close to 100 years old. And I put it in the mailbox. So I texted Marguerite this morning and I told her, make sure your mother checks her mailbox. Still lives by herself too. And she texted me back. I was just down getting some work done on my car that I got your book. My mother's so happy. I'm arguing with her who's going to read it first. She wants to read it. We're going to have to share it. I'm going to have to go over her house at night and pick it up so I can read it at my house, that kind of thing. You wanted to know, how much do I owe you? I said, you've been my neighbor my whole life. I said, you don't owe me. It's a gift. It's my pleasure. I hear from people on a regular basis. Many of them I know. Many of them I don't really know. I recognize some of the names. I heard from a woman in Rome recently, Rome, New York. I didn't when she told me her maiden name. I said, oh, okay, now I know who you're talking about. I knew her grandmother. So pretty good. I haven't, it was published in about September 20th. So the quarter ended end of September. So my statement, because it takes a little while to catch up with the sales, because all these different people have to, or stores or whatever, have to report in. And my statement at the end of September still said no sales, but I wouldn't expect there was. Maybe there was. I don't know. But I talked to my publication person the other day. I said, don't tell me. I want to be surprised when December comes. I want to be surprised. I said, but just give me your opinion. What do you think? Don't give me a number. Just give me your opinion. What do you think? And she checked it on her screen and said, hey, for the short period of time here, pretty good. So I said, okay, that's all I want to know right now. And I'll talk to you in December when I get a statement at the end of the quarter there. But from what I could tell, pretty good. Pretty good. I had a nice article in the front page article in the Rome newspaper last week. A number of people contacted me, said I saw the article, this and that. So from what I can tell, pretty good.
Yeah. One of the things I want to know is, from the people who've contacted you around the country, is this kind of a neighborhood where you've got a self-contained within 5 blocks kind of world? Is that something common that other people in other communities have experienced?
Oh, I'm sure, you could, now again, we're talking the 40s and the 50s and the 60s.
Right,
so you could extrapolate that, to the whole world. I'm sure it was very unique. I had one guy ask me kind of the same question. And he said to me, well, what was unique? Because frankly, you're all white Europeans. And I said, yeah, you're right about that. There was no black people or Asian people. But you know what, Dave? If they were there, they would have been just as accepted.
Yeah, they would have been just part of the group.
And I said to him, oh, no, you're absolutely right. But let me pose this question. And the guy was an attorney. I said, let me pose this question. Why do all the Caucasians in the world get along? Does every Asian person in the world get along with every other Asian person?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
So I guess you could make that case, but on the other hand, I guess you can't, because people are people, and if they're going to get along, they're going to get along. If they're not, they're not.
I don't know. There were 6 houses on my street when I grew up, and then if I count the couple other streets around it, I don't think I could ever write a book about it. I think I'd run out of ammunition in the first chapter.
Not this. Somebody has suggested to me to write The Queen of Orchard Street. I said, hey,
that's not a bad idea.
Yeah. So no, everybody's got a story, Dave, and you just got to get it out there. You got to tell it. And I had a woman say to me last night, who was my neighbor on Orchard Street. She said, I'm writing a book too. And I said, good. Her name is Mary. I said, good, Mary. Everybody can do this. You can do this. I said, what's the name of your book? This was great. She said, well, Chicken Soup for the Soul and all that. I said, yeah. She said, my book is Chicken Soup is Not Good for the Chicken. Because that's a good
title. Yeah.
Yeah, another girl who moved out of Frankfort. Oh my gosh, probably when she graduated from college. She's my age. She lives in the Washington, D.C. area, and she's writing a book Life Among the Blue-Haired Ladies.
Oh, good
You
Lord.
know, I could
Yeah.
do that
Oh, yeah.
trade.
Yeah.
You put
Yeah.
that blue rinse or whatever.
I don't know
know.
what it is that happens.
I should probably be doing that. That kind of thing.
That would be
So I
a
said,
good
but,
one.
you know, everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a story.
So what's your next story?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a funny thing. There's two possibilities. One is a local yokel story here in Whitesboro of a tragedy that happened many, many years ago. And the guy who was convicted and imprisoned for 25 years and then exonerated of this tragedy, I guess you could say, his story is a possibility.
Wow.
But that's kind of a negative story. And I mentioned it to my son at one point. He said, "Dad, don't do that." I mean, this guy's still got people in this area that are not his friend. That's for
Right.
sure. And, you know, you go stir in the pot here, it might have an effect on you.
Yeah. I know
Me.
all about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, yeah, possibly not. And then oddly, Dave, I graduated from college in 1977. And a friend of mine at the time gave me, they used to call them writer's books. It was basically a book with blank pages. You remember those things? And you write in them.
What,
Yeah,
like a diary, like a diary kind of thing?
yeah,
Or,
but
yeah.
this was it was bound like a hard covered book and all of
Right.
that. I don't know if they're still around. They probably
I think they are. I mean, just for you to, a lot of
could
people
be.
actually are going back to that where you just
It
kind
could
of
be.
put down your thoughts of the
Yeah.
day, you know, because we've got all this technology around us, and the
That's
reality
why.
is we lose everything.
That's
Right.
everything's dictation now, and we're
Yeah. Yeah.
so she gave me a writer's book, and I started working on a story, and then I graduated from college, and I moved back to this area, and I put it in my dad's house someplace, and never saw it again.
Wow.
I'm back to it. This is going to be completely fiction. I had originally named it, I got to think now, Zoo Animals, but I think I'm going to change that name to Gold Tarnished. This is a story that's going to start in about the 1820s in a place called Goree Island, Africa. It's off the east coast of Africa, Goree. And it's going to weave itself through probably 100 and 200 years, perhaps, to a summer Olympics game, whenever the next summer Olympics game comes along. And the book is ready to be published. And that's going to be the final setting for it. And I can't tell you anymore because then I'll be telling you the story.
Yeah, I know. It sounds interesting.
That's a possibility for me. I'm thinking about that. I started doing some research on it. Oh, I don't know, on a Sunday afternoon, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, a month ago. I'll be going to Georgia after Christmas. So I figure when I get there to Georgia and I can just hang out and do what I want to do, that's when I'll start working on it. I have a funny video that I said to my wife, and people get a kick out of this. This was maybe a month ago or 3 weeks ago. I said, Carol, get your camera. I said, I want you to video this. So here I am, laying in bed with my glasses and my cell phone, you know, and all this junk, about 10:30 in the morning. I said, start that. And I'm telling her, if I don't ever let me write a book again, because it takes too long, not so much to write it and edit it, but the page design, the cover design, the social media, and I'm changing my calendar and I'm going back and forth and this date, now this date, and this date. I said, don't ever let me write another one. Next time I say to you, I'm going to write another book, I'm going to go work on my book, you show me this video. You see that? So don't get me involved with this. You told me, and I'm telling you, so do not get me involved with this.
Should we run that video? Should we run that video as part of this podcast?
Well, you should have when we're done here. We'll run.
Yeah, we'll just throw it in.
Do this again. So, well, you know, it's a weird thing. And I had RJ Lenarsik's daughter tell me this. She's a writer.
Yes.
She has written a number of books. She writes like middle school books.
Yep.
She lives in Albany or Saratoga, somewhere in that area. And I got connected to her just coincidentally through a mutual friend. And, she said to me one day, she said, the writer's got to write. It kind of gets in your blood. And like Orchard Street, it gets in your blood and it's hard to get rid of it. And it really, that is the truth. Again, she said, writer's got to write. Because I asked her, what are you writing? And she's published a number of books.
Right.
And I was a middle school teacher. I said, so yeah, I understand exactly where you're coming from. And she said to me, writers got to write. And I said, you're right. It gets in your blood, and you figure, I'm done with it. And then it's hard to get done with it.
Yeah.
It's hard to get done with it.
Well, where can we find your books?
Simplest, just Google the title, The King of Orchard Street. It'll come up to links for Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the usual sites. Shop them because sales come and go.
Yep.
Some places are less expensive than others. The best place I find to purchase them is a company called Thrift Books, like Thrift Books. It's like $18, no shipping. Amazon, they add a lot of fees and this and that. But really just Google the title and you'll find all the links, all the information. You can always look at my Facebook. I'm in the process, my publisher, that stuff that they're still doing, to set up a Instagram account for me and that kind of thing. But just Google the title and there's so much information. You'd be amazed how many, there's an Orchard Street like anywhere you go in America. There's a Railroad Street, there's a Garden Street, there's an Orchard Street, there's a Johnny Cake Road, no matter where you go.
Yeah.
You would be surprised how many books have that title, have Orchard Street in it. There's one called The Ice Cream Queen of Orchard Street. There's another one called Up from Orchard Street. There's another one called Tales from Orchard Street. There's a whole bunch of them.
Oh, wow. I live on Garden Street, by the way. So you got
right. Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. If you Google the title, you'll find all kinds of links, all kinds of information. You'll get my Facebook, my LinkedIn, what's that other thing? X. I put information on there. These days, like you said, with technology, it's so easy to find stuff, find information about stuff. So yeah, I urge people to, this is a kind of thing. When you read a good book, you tend to absorb it. And if you allow it to absorb you, kind of a two-way street, symbiotic thing. If you absorb it and it absorbs you, you'd be amazed what you could learn from literally any book. Yeah. But you got to have that ability to let it sink into you and let you sink into it. And if you do, any book, from the best to the worst, can teach you something. You can put it down and say, I never saw it in that light. I never thought about it in that light. Yep. Let it absorb you. You absorb it and let it absorb you. And it really turns out, and I'm not saying that because it's mine. I mean that for any book.
Any book, yep.
You'd be amazed if you do it, how much you can really learn from any book.
Awesome, Fetty. I've appreciated the conversation today.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
It was awesome. All right.
Thank
you, everyone, for listening today. That's all we have for Small Town Life. We'll see you next time.